Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
And it's 7 minutes past 9. You're listening to SAfm, South Africa's news and information leader. So welcome back to the program, hoping that you are having a fantastic Freedom Day, whether you're at home relaxing or you're on the road or on your way to a number of celebrations taking place across the country. We'll keep you company this morning. We're broadcasting live from the Union buildings, well, the South Lawn, really, just in front of the Union buildings. And members of the public have started arriving here. There's some entertainment taking place, so that'll be the constant background sound throughout the morning. Now, this day, as you know, it commemorates the first democratic elections held in South Africa on the 27th of April 1994, and it's celebrated annually as a reminder of the struggle for a free and just South Africa. This day also honors all the heroes and heroines who have lost their lives fighting for democracy. So the theme for this year's celebration is working together to build unity and prosperity for all. So I'd like to know how you are celebrating this day. What is its significance to you? Do you remember where you were on this day 18 years ago? What were your dreams and hopes for our country at that time, and have they all come true? Which have and which haven't come true? Share all of those with us later on in the program. But as we indicated, we're going to begin our conversation this morning getting reaction to the verdict in the Charles Taylor trial at the Special Court of Sierra Leone at The Hague. He was found guilty on all 11 counts of aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity in Sierra Leone. Taylor is the only former head of state since Nuremberg to be convicted for war crimes or crimes against humanity by an international or hybrid international national tribunal. Charles Taylor was a sitting head of state when he was indicted. Now, sentencing arguments are expected to be delivered on May 16th, and Charles Taylor will be allowed to address the court at that time, and the actual sentence is expected to be handed down on May the 30th. He will serve any prison term in the United Kingdom, and that's based on an agreement that was reached with the Netherlands. So this morning, Taylor's lawyer will be speaking, lead defense counsel to Courtney Griffiths QC, as well as a representative from Human Rights Watch who has watched the trial very, very closely. It's hard to evaluate the significance of the Charles Taylor trial because there is partisanship involved here. For proponents of international justice, it represents an end to impunity for the perpetrators of these types of crimes, and for detractors, it symbolizes the triumph of power politics over justice. So I guess the truth lies somewhere in between. We'll hear which side you fall into on 0891104207, 0891104207, SMSs to 34701. So we're going to start that conversation in a moment.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
On SAfm 104 to 107, in conversation right now with Gell, who is fellow on international justice at Human Rights Watch, and will be joined shortly by Courtney Griffiths QC, his Charles Taylor's lead defense counsel, and we'll take your calls as well. Annie, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Your immediate reaction yesterday to the verdict?
Well, it was a historic day, certainly. As you said, it really is a landmark for efforts for justice for the gravest crimes against the highest level leaders. What yesterday showed us is that impunity is no longer the rule, and that those at the highest echelons of power can be held to account for the gravest crimes.
So that was really, as I said, for those who've watched this very closely and proponents of international justice, it represents an end to impunity for perpetrators of these sorts of crimes. But what about the other side of the hat, Annie, where people, for detractors who say it really symbolizes the triumph of power politics over justice? Why is it that it's only Africans who seem to land up in the court?
Well, certainly I want to make the point that there is a long way to go to end impunity in the world. Yesterday was a watershed moment, as you mentioned earlier, the first time a highest level leader, a president, or a former head of state, has been convicted of serious international crimes since Nuremberg. But impunity is still alive and well in the world. Human Rights Watch believes that justice is a critical building block of lasting peace and stability. And it's important to note that the Special Court for Sierra Leone was created through an agreement with the government of Sierra Leone after the armed conflict ended there with the United Nations. So I can tell you, when I was in Sierra Leone last in January, that victims, ex-combatants, many people told me that they really saw Taylor being held to account through a fair and a proper trial, respecting fair trial rights. They really saw that holding Taylor to account was a linchpin for accountability for the atrocities that they had suffered.
And I want to talk about the victims. I was watching various news channels yesterday afternoon, some getting reaction from people on the streets in both Sierra Leone and in Liberia. But just sticking with the trial, the prosecution failed to establish two of its principal charges: that Taylor had effective command and control of rebel forces in Sierra Leone and therefore bore individual criminal responsibility for the crime, or that he was part of a joint criminal enterprise. What's the significance of this?
Well, so Taylor was convicted on all 11 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. So what you're pointing to is that there were three modes of liability, or reasons that the prosecution put forward that he could be held criminally responsible for those 11 counts. And as you said, the court found that he was not guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of participating in a joint criminal enterprise or of direct command responsibility, that he did not have direct control over the individuals that were actually perpetrating directly the abuses. What he was found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of was aiding and abetting the atrocities, as well as planning attacks on 3 districts in Sierra Leone. So, I think that it was by all accounts a reasoned opinion by the court. They took over 2.5 hours to explain the summary of the judgment, and I think it shows that this was a process that was taken very seriously by all actors.
Do you think that the prosecution could appeal that part of the judgment? There wasn't any clear indication from the prosecutors yesterday.
Yes, so both the prosecution and defense have the opportunity to appeal, and the prosecution does have the opportunity to appeal on those two issues, on the joint criminal enterprise and the direct command responsibility. The lead prosecutor, Brenda Hollis, did not give an indication in her press conference after the verdict was announced as to whether or not they would appeal. But both sides must signal their intent to appeal within 14 days of receipt of full judgment, which has not happened yet. We only got a summary of the judgment yesterday.
Well, lawyers are going to be studying that particular section of the judgment quite closely to see the implication that it might have for the trials of Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic at the International Criminal Tribunal of the former Yugoslavia. What do you think about that?
Certainly, I think this is a case that will be studied for decades to come. And as you mentioned, the impact of this case is, as I said, historic, but it will take time to realize for the legal field as well as for the victims of Sierra Leone. I think it's also important to note that what yesterday also highlighted is that the victims in Liberia, war victims in Liberia, former combatants, many people that suffered and their families in Liberia have not yet seen justice. The court only has a mandate to try crimes that happened in a certain time period within the territory of Sierra Leone. So Human Rights Watch calls on the Liberian government to also pursue justice for the victims of their armed conflict.
Now, getting to the human dimension of this, I suppose, would you say this is an opportunity for the victims and the international community to reflect on how badly things went in the Sierra Leone conflict?
Certainly, as anybody knows that has even a most basic knowledge of what happened during Sierra Leone's armed conflict, the atrocities were really shocked the conscience of the world and should have shocked the conscience of the world. And justice through prosecution is really one piece towards building a stable, lasting peace going forward. And there's obviously a lot to do in both Sierra Leone and Liberia. But yesterday was a measure of accountability, was a measure of justice for people that suffered so greatly, and really can never be made whole again. But certainly they deserve all the justice that is possible to deliver.
There are other warlords who haven't faced the music in Liberia and Sierra Leone. There's a feeling among some in Monrovia that these people are walking free, so there isn't equality in the meting out of justice.
Certainly, justice is uneven, particularly when you're discussing in these cases of really widespread atrocities.
Yeah.
And my understanding is, I was in Monrovia as well in January, and the reaction to the Taylor verdict was certainly more mixed than, or to the Taylor trial, excuse me, was certainly more mixed than in Freetown and Sierra Leone beyond Freetown.
Yeah.
However, I think it's important to note that the Liberian government has really put development above justice, and without addressing the atrocities of the past, it would be difficult to build stability and a lasting peace.
In conversation with Annie Gell, who is a fellow on international justice and Human Rights Watch. We're also hoping to speak to Courtney Griffiths, QC, who is Charles Taylor's lead defense counsel. Just getting some reaction to the verdict that was delivered yesterday afternoon. And we'll hear from you as well on 0891104207, 0891104207, SMSs to 34701.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
21 minutes past 9. You're listening to SAfm 104 to 107. We'll read some of your SMSs in reaction on 34701 at a cost of R2, and I'll see what Annie thinks about what you've had to say. Someone says, Siki, George Bush and Tony Blair did not use child soldiers to chop off both hands of countless innocent children. Why do our Muslims defend him blacklisted? Okay. Charles in Cape Town says, if guilty by association, where are the associates? Now we need to have Blair and George Bush appear before the International Court of Justice. And Ike Kumalo in Soweto says the likes of Mabutu, Taylor, etc. don't mushroom for anything. They are sponsored by the West for minerals. When is Bush going to the ICC? Sybil in Cape Town says ICC trial. When is it going to be Robert Mugabe's turn at the ICC? This cruel despot just goes on and on. Joy says, Siki, to those who ask why the ICC doesn't prosecute President Bush and Mugabe, the reason is Mugabe and Bush are not signatories to the ICC, and that's a fact. Sam Lumumba in KZN says the trial of Charles Taylor is a remarkable precedent for African leaders like Museveni of Uganda and Mugabe of Zim and Paul Biya of Cameroon and Eduardo. Interesting comments there, because again, the legitimacy, Annie, of the court is going to rest on people seeing a level of fairness.
Certainly, and I think it's important to say at the outset that Human Rights Watch believes that justice for some shouldn't be sacrificed in the hopes of justice for all. The fact is that, as I mentioned, we do live in a world where impunity is still very much a fact, and the field of international justice is uneven. I want to point to one of your listeners' comments who mentioned that the reason that Bush and Blair cannot be brought before the International Criminal Court is indeed because of international power dynamics. There are three ways to be brought before the International Criminal Court. Yeah. One is an invitation from the government for the ICC to come in and do an investigation. Yeah. Another is a Security Council referral, and the third is upon the ICC's own action, which is what happened in Kenya. But because the U.S. and the U.K. are not signatories to the Rome Statute, the fact is that the likelihood of them being brought before the ICC, and because of the veto power of powerful countries on the Security Council, the likelihood of going before the ICC is really very small.
Absolutely. So going forward, obviously, there was the deal that was struck between the U.K. and the Netherlands for him to serve any prison term over there. Do we know what average term he might be facing?
We don't yet. As you mentioned in your introduction, there'll be arguments on sentencing on May 16th, and the sentence will be handed down on May 30th, so it's not too long before we do know. The longest sentence that has been handed out by the Special Court for Sierra Leone was 52 years. So that's kind of the highest, the longest sentence that we've seen, but really nobody quite knows yet what Taylor's sentence will be.
All right, we're going to take some calls then on 0891104207, SMSs to 34701. Let's hear from Faisal in Mayfair. Hi, Faisal.
Hi, Siki.
Hi.
And good morning to your guests. Siki, I think this is truly a historic moment. I welcome the ICC decision to sentence Charles Taylor. But what I'm hoping is that the ICC will become the court of the world. In other words, every single nation should be using this particular court as the paramount court for all the human atrocities committed in the world. And I'm hoping that eventually the states like United States and Britain and so forth will see the enlightenment of this particular court and to be able to entrench human rights throughout the world. And I'm hoping that the pressure to be paid upon these countries because it's mainly with the countries with the support of the United States, for example, and Britain, that truly the ICC will become the greatest court in the world.
Thanks, Faisal. Annie, what's the likelihood that we will see that happening?
Well, Human Rights Watch advocates for the strengthening of the ICC, as your caller really was touching on. It's critical that states that are interested in seeing justice done contribute their support to the International Criminal Court, continue to insist on accountability for leaders at the highest levels who are responsible for the gravest abuses. It's a long road, and the ICC certainly has a long way to go. However, you have to remember what a young institution it is, and what a young process international justice is. Nuremberg was, half a century ago. However, really it was the 90s that saw the ICTY in the former Yugoslavia, the Rwanda court as well. The ICC is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. So while there is a long way to go, a lot has been done in the past decade to push forward international justice and justice for victims of the worst crimes.
Ruben in Pretoria, good morning. Hi, Ruben. All right, I think we might have lost Ruben. Just watching the trial over the years, anything strike you in what actually took place? Because if you look at the prosecution's claims, for example, the prosecutor said Taylor backed RUF rebels fighting in Sierra Leone, and he had close links with senior RUF leaders, that he had ties to another warring faction, that's the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, and that he was responsible for Liberian forces fighting in support of rebel forces in Sierra Leone.
The trial, it's important to note that the trial, and Human Rights Watch certainly believes that a key to justice is fairness in the trial. Something that's very notable about this trial, and if Courtney joins us, he can certainly point this out, is that it was a vigorously litigated case. Both sides had ample opportunity to present their case fully. Mr. Griffiths and his team is one of the most eminent defense teams ever assembled for an international justice case. It was really quite a strong and eminent team. Charles Taylor took over 7 months on the stand to speak on his own behalf, which is really an exceptional amount of time to be given to an accused, and I think makes it clear that Taylor did have the opportunity to have his case heard, not only by the court, but really by the world.
Many questioned the way he got there in the first place, and we know the circumstances under which he landed up in The Hague. Does that not leave a bit of a bad taste among some?
Well, I think that the Taylor case is particularly interesting because there was a large period in time where no one, or very few, believed that Taylor would actually be held to account. You'll remember that after his indictment was unsealed, and then he gave up the presidency in Liberia, he was offered safe haven in Nigeria for 3 years, where he lived in comfortable exile in Calabar. This is a wake-up call, I think. Yesterday's verdict and the trial process as a whole is a wake-up call to leaders such as Sudan's Omar al-Bashir, that while justice might not come today, while it might take a long time, that justice is looming down the road. As you know, Omar al-Bashir has an outstanding warrant from the International Criminal Court for very serious crimes alleged in Darfur.
Let's hear from Lebo Hung in Johannesburg. Hi, Lebo Hung.
Hi, Siki and the listeners. I'm not sure if I'm out of step with the popular sentiment, but I'm not extremely excited about this outcome. I think that the principle of justice and the principle of people who have been excessive in their use of authoritarianism and power and state resources is absolutely essential to the progression of the African continent. But I do find that the question that you asked at the beginning has not been responded to, which is the notion of power politics, and which is the crux of the matter. Why it is that this is, for me, I think that the ICC is becoming an instrument of aggression against particular leaders, and I think that it's not becoming really an instrument of justice. It's an instrument and a weapon, rather, to punish at the terms of the West. And I think that we need to interrogate this. And I think that as an African continent, we should really be beefing up and examining how we deal with our own contradictions and the excesses of leadership and the abuses of leadership on our own continent. But I'm not excited about this at all. And I think the question has been asked about why people like George Bush do not get, their warrant. It's not enough to say that they're not signatories. That in itself, we should ask ourselves why then the United States is not a signatory to this, and why the law is not applicable to all leaders. Thank you very much. I'll listen on the radio.
Thanks, Lev. We'll get a response for you. Naeem in Alberton, morning.
Hello. Greetings to you and your guest. I echo the sentiments of your last speaker. And, Shirley, the last comment she makes is very pertinent, that why are these people not the signatories? And that raises the whole question on the whole basis on which the ICC was established. The people that wrote up the laws and regulations in how cases can be referred and should be referred, all of that is highly problematic, because all of these laws in setting up these structures were written and crafted by these dominant Western powers. So, the whole international legal system is actually designed to ensure their immunity and prosecute those that they want to prosecute. The corruption of legal processes is very famous. The Maghrahi case in Libya, it's evident to anybody that really does a proper investigation that it was a total, travesty of justice. Another point, you can't have half justice, or you can't have quarter justice. A person is either a virgin or not a virgin. You can't have a quarter virgin or half a virgin. So, this is actually a travesty of justice. In this particular case, the court haven't found the people that are actually guilty of the command and control. So, in other words, those people that are actually the guilty party, those people that actively participated in the killing, they are still roaming around free. And the person that is kind of nominally in charge, he's been, torn apart. But the actual killers and the people that are actually the superiors and the people actually instructing the killing are still roaming free. How can this be justice? And obviously the Bush and Blair and all the other, that's quite self-evident. Yeah. So really, this is actually a mockery of justice.
All right. Thanks to Naeem. Let's hear from Kenneth in Bethel. Hi, Kenneth.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, Kenneth.
I'm okay, man. No, I'm also not particularly happy about this verdict. I mean, if you look at Israel. I mean, killing people there in Israel and bombing people, no one has been indicted. And if you look at the SAfm case, 1976, killing innocent people there. But those people who issue orders for those school children to be killed, they haven't been indicted. Some of them are still even alive even today. I'm just saying that it's just that they are, if you look at it, just want to terrorize the leadership of Africa. I mean, even those guys who assisted the rebels in Libya to kill Muammar Gaddafi, nothing is said about them. They are heroes, those people there. But in fact, what they did was not correct. The killing of a person cannot be accepted. They are just targeting particular leaders that they think they are not according to their democracy as they understand it, democracy.
Right.
It's very unfair. I'm particularly saying that people like the then President Tom Mbeki were very vocal in this to say can't be targeting African leaders. If needs you have justice, let it be fair.
Okay.
Every person, George Bush, every person who has done something wrong needs to be indicted.
All
The
right.
fact that you're not a signatory cannot mean that you've got the right to kill other people.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Thanks, Kenneth. That's Kenneth in Bethel. We'll take more calls on 0891104207. SMSs to 34701 in conversation with Annie Gell, who is a fellow on international justice at Human Rights Watch. I think let's get a response for you from Annie before we take any more calls and read some SMSs. So, again, that feeling of complete unfairness, and in fact, Naeem questioning the actual principles and the setting up of this institution of the International Criminal Court.
Yeah, thanks for those calls and the serious engagement with the underlying issues. I'll just point out there was really a lot brought up, but I'll point out one major thing, which is that I think the facts of the International Criminal Court's engagement with Africa have to be looked at a little more starkly. The fact is that over half of the situations that are currently being dealt with by the ICC from the African continent are actually a result of voluntary referrals from the governments in question. So the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and the Central African Republic, who are all parties to the ICC, meaning that their governments decided on their own to become a part of this institution. They referred their cases to that institution for justice. Human Rights Watch certainly believes that the best possible scenario is that justice is handled domestically, but in the world that we live in, the fact is that there are domestic systems that just don't have the capacity to handle prosecutions like the prosecution of Charles Taylor, for example. The fourth case, the fourth case that I want to talk about in Africa at the ICC is Côte d'Ivoire, and Côte d'Ivoire was actually a special request from the government of Côte d'Ivoire, who is a non-state party, to the ICC for ICC involvement in the post-coup military and political violence there. So I think we need to be careful about kind of speaking in broad strokes about West versus Africa or international justice versus Africa, and actually really consider, what are victims saying, what are governments saying in Africa, and when governments have requested the assistance of the ICC, that's a sovereign decision that those African governments have made.
So they, as you say, it is voluntary, and those were decisions made by the governments of those specific countries. But on the question of those who actually perpetrated the crime and those who are still walking around, what is the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court?
Well, in the particular Sierra Leone case, which I'll speak about, that actually, just to clarify, wasn't the International Criminal Court. That's the Special Court for Sierra Leone, which is a separate entity that is now winding down its operations. Yeah. And the Taylor case was the last major case at that institution. The Special Court, its jurisdiction is limited to those bearing the greatest responsibility. So from the beginning, the court was set up to only address those at the highest levels that were really pulling the strings, as it were, of the violence that was happening. And I certainly understand, and I hear this from victims all the time, from amputees, from rape victims, from victims of torture, that many people want those that directly perpetrated the crimes punished. And I think that that's a very important point. However, that doesn't mitigate the responsibility of those at the top. Taylor was convicted beyond a reasonable doubt of engaging in the blood diamond trade to supply vast amounts of ammunition and arms, supplying fighters, supplying moral support. So in some ways, it's certainly not I think playing a relative blame game is useless, but there certainly is culpability in sitting in your nice, safe mansion from far away and fomenting the death and violence from afar.
We're going to take a call from Eddie in Edenvale in a moment.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
on SAfm, South Africa's news and information leader. If you're wondering what's up with the noise in the background, well, we are broadcasting live from the South Lawns, just in front of the Union buildings, where the Freedom Day celebrations are taking place, commemorating our first democratic elections held in South Africa on the 27th of April 1994, celebrated annually as a reminder of the struggle for a free and just South Africa. And this day also honors all the heroes and heroines who have lost their lives fighting for democracy. We'll get into all of those discussions after the news at 10 with the Viknashan Naidu. But right now, getting some reaction on the verdict in the Charles Taylor trial at the Special Court of Sierra Leone at The Hague in the Netherlands. And it took close to 5 years, including 13 months, for the judges to write their judgment, and Taylor found guilty on all 11 counts of aiding and abetting war crimes and crimes against humanity in Sierra Leone, the only former head of state since Nuremberg to be convicted for war crimes or crimes against humanity by an international or hybrid international national tribunal. Let's take a call from Eddie in Edenvale. Hi, Eddie.
Hello, Siggy. Happy Freedom Day.
To you as well.
Wonderful. It's an honor to live in such a wonderful country.
Mm.
And I just want to say, it's very disappointing that Annie seems to fudge all these issues of selective Western morality. Very disappointing that Human Rights Watch doesn't take a stronger stand against this injustice. From the tone of your callers, the great majority of South Africans are not happy with this situation. That countries like Israel, Bush, Blair are not held to the same high standards. And I certainly say that Africa should take a stronger stance here and threaten to pull out of this business when, as you brought up in the beginning, only Africans seem to be held accountable and hauled before the court. Why can't a thug like Bush be held equally accountable, and Africa should threaten to pull out of this court until there's equal accountability for all countries. We all want justice. It's significant that most African states have signed up to the precepts of the court, but not America. Because it's exactly why they're the warmongering thugs of the world, foreign wars all around the globe, and they're scared of being held accountable in front of the World Court Justice. Thank you for a wonderful show. You're the best and fairest presenter on radio. Thanks, Iggy,
Thanks,
and have
Eddie.
a wonderful Freedom Day.
You have a great day as well. Bye. That's Eddie in Edenvale. And he feels that Human Rights Watch is not taking a strong enough stance. Annie?
Well, thanks for your call. I would point out that Human Rights Watch released a report, a very lengthy and deeply researched report on the need for accountability for U.S. officials in the war against terror and their part in torture. So certainly Human Rights Watch agrees with you that justice is a basic right of all people of the world, and that those who are enjoying impunity, no matter where they live, should be held accountable, whether it's in the United States or in Africa. I would just point out, and I said it before, but just to make sure that the point is clear, that each government that is a member of the ICC, whether in Africa or abroad, that's a sovereign choice of that government. So whether or not that government has signed the treaty to become the member of the ICC is a question for consultation within that government and with that government's own citizens. So that's really a choice that's beyond the influence of Human Rights Watch. However, Human Rights Watch does advocate for the broadening and strengthening of the ICC's reach.
What do you think the impact on, and we'll step aside from the Sierra Leone court at the moment, the special court, and just talk about the ICC very quickly. If all the African countries that are signatories to the Roman Statute all decided, you know what, we're going to pull out, what would that do to international justice?
Well, that would be a very dramatic move, obviously, and Human Rights Watch certainly advocates for the expansion of international justice, not the kind of cutting out the legs from underneath it. I think that would be a very sad day for victims. I can tell you that victims in Sierra Leone and Liberia, both in Sierra Leone, has had some small modicum of justice for the crimes that they suffered. Liberia really has not. But victims do want to see accountability. They do want to see that the horrible atrocities that they suffered, that there's some consequence for those that are responsible for that. So I think the International Criminal Court, while certainly an imperfect and young institution, has the potential to provide some form of justice where the other option is complete impunity.
Is it Carmen in Durban asks, so what happens to Charles Taylor now that he has been proven guilty? So obviously there's still the appeal process, and I understand that he will be given 30 minutes to address the court, should he so wish?
That's correct. Yeah, so there'll be arguments on or hearings on the sentencing on May 16th. The sentence will be handed down on May 30th, where both sides, both defense and prosecution, will be given an hour to speak, as well as Mr. Taylor himself will be given half an hour to address the court if he so wishes. And that sentencing process runs in parallel with the appeals process. So the appeals process, each side must signal their intention to appeal within 14 days of the handing down of the full judgment, and that will be litigated going forward.
All right. And then just explain why he would be serving his time in the UK and not at The Hague.
This was a decision. It was one of the prerequisites for the Netherlands to host the trial in The Hague. One of the prerequisites, really coming from President of Liberia, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, was that the trial not be held in West Africa, and the Netherlands agreed to host the trial on the understanding that a third country would take Taylor if he was convicted of the crimes. The United Kingdom stepped up and agreed to do that. So Taylor will serve any sentence in the United Kingdom.
Philip in Cape Town, morning.
Hi there. Look, I just wanted to say that it's fantastic that we have this result and that somebody is being held accountable. But the problem is the court runs the risk of being seen as an instrument of imperialism, because whether Human Rights Watch writes reports or not, it's neither here nor there. The fact is governments like the US and other powerful countries undermine the court. They don't themselves recognize it, and none of their leaders are held accountable. And I think that is the real problem. Unless these issues are addressed, the court will surely decline and become a moribund institution, and I think that's bad for everyone. So the main strategic issue is that the Western countries, the powerful countries, must be held to account, and we have not seen that happen once.
Who do you think needs to push for it? Would it be at a UN level? Who's got the clout to get everybody around a table?
Well, I think it's a number of institutions. The UN would be one, but then also citizens in countries, because everybody sits back in their comfort zones in the developed world, watching the stuff on TV. Their airplanes are bombing people in Libya, bombing people in Iraq, killing people in Afghanistan, and no one's been held to account. So the primary responsibility resides with the citizens and the governments of those countries.
Fantastic. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you.
Bye. Mashaule in Pretoria, good morning.
How are you doing, my sister?
I am well, thank you.
And your guest. My dear, my take on the Charles Taylor case, I'm still saying the Human Rights Watch, to me, they're still biased and racist, because it's like they are looking only in Africa, and you can see these wars that we have in Africa of diamonds and other things. Europeans are involved in terms of buying these things, you understand? And then you look at countries like Iraq, George Bush said it right. They've got all the records to say he went to Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. He killed people, but they kept quiet. But now they want to tell us about Charles. We're not saying that Charles Taylor, what he did is correct.
Are you saying
But,
that? Wait, are you saying that Human Rights Watch kept quiet when
yes,
Iraq was
that's
being
keeping
bombed?
quiet.
That's
keeping
not
quiet.
true, though.
For example, I can give you an example that, for me, I still don't understand today. Maybe somebody needs to come and explain to me nicely. You have a country like, can you close a bit? You have a country like the Switzerland. Switzerland has got the Swiss bank kept money of people have committed crime, and they say it's their law. I don't understand what the take of the human rights, because that money which has been kept in the Swiss bank, some money has been, the people got that money through killing people, then from there they went and banked in the Swiss bank. Now the Swiss bank tells that it's part of their law to take money of the criminals. So what is the take of the Human Rights Watch?
Let me hear what Annie has to say. Annie?
Sure. Thanks for your call. I want to say first that I couldn't be more in agreement with your first caller, Philip,
yes.
That citizens of the country, particularly in democracies, that it's our job as citizens to make our government reflect the values and the imperative for human rights that we believe is correct. As for your second caller, I would disagree that Human Rights Watch has been quiet on issues of human rights violations around the world. We have offices and researchers of all nationalities that are working around the world, certainly not just in Africa, to expose human rights abuses and to stand with victims and to amplify their voices, to make sure that the world is not silent when human rights violations are committed. So I would just point that out and make sure that it's very clear that Human Rights Watch is a non-governmental international organization that does not represent the views or the foreign policy of any particular government.
So just maybe to explain to Mashaula your process and how you express your views on certain issues like the bombing of Iraq, for example, and whatever human rights abuses might have taken place there. And also he's talking about Switzerland and Swiss banks and hiding people's money. What approach do you take as Human Rights Watch to express your view on such actions?
Well, I'd invite listeners to take a look at our website where our research is put forward. We have very active programs in the Middle East. We have active programs in Europe and Central Asia. And certainly these issues that your caller brings up are major issues implicating human rights. So I would invite listeners to look at our research. Our model is that we send impartial individuals, as I said, of all nationalities and individuals that speak all different languages to and sometimes are citizens of the country in which they're doing research to conduct impartial research, really to speak with victims and those that have experienced human rights abuses, and to report back. So Human Rights Watch, really, the model is built on the credibility of our research. So yes, I would invite anybody that's interested to take a look at our website and look at the work that we've done, not just in Africa, but all over the world.
All right, and we'll get that website address when we wrap up. Bonnie and Trinity, please stay on the line. I'll come to you next.
Morning Talk with Siki Mgabadeli.
4 minutes to 10, just wrapping up our conversation with Annie Gell, who is a fellow on international justice at Human Rights Watch. Great pity that we were not able to connect with Courtney Griffiths, QC, who is Charles Taylor's lead defense counsel. We have spoken to him a couple of times on the program, and he was definitely confirmed to be on the program this morning. So we're going to try and maybe get him on at another occasion just to get his reaction and find out what sort of strategy they're going to be deploying going forward. I was watching the delivery of the judgment yesterday. Charles Taylor looking very calm, but you can never know what's going on in someone's mind when you're just watching them. He looked very calm on television yesterday. Let's hear from Trinity in Johannesburg. Hi, Trinity.
Your guest.
Hi.
A wonderful program once again.
Thank
and
you.
I always enjoy listening to what you bring to the table.
Thank you.
Just a few points of observation from my side. The Human Rights Watch is doing an excellent job in terms of exposing what is happening around us as the people of the world. But as long as we have people who hold sway in terms of the areas such as the UN Security Council, who can veto anything that is brought to the table, we will continue to find that Human Rights Watch, the work that they do, excellent as it is, will not gain audience. And that's why you find people like Charles Taylor becoming victims of such systems. Because if you compare Charles Taylor to what happened in Iran, in Iraq, in the Taliban, etc., you find that the equation is the same. But the justice that is meted out is not equated in any way, because even though people expose these things, but you find that those who hold the power, the economic power, the political power, continue to veto all this work that is being done.
Yeah.
And in that way, I think that one must not crush the work that's done by Human Rights Watch. One must celebrate it, but express the concern that as long as we have people in power that are not willing to listen, as long as people like South Africa not getting a seat in the Security Council, we will continue to become victims of mental slavery as it has always been.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trinity. Let's take one final, very quick call from Loyiso in Cape Town. Loyiso, please be brief.
Yes, hi, Siki, how are you?
I am well, thank you.
Yes. Siki, I want to agree more with your second last caller, that was questioning the activities of the Human Rights Watch. And you also asked a pertinent question when you asked how they express themselves. And I think your guest is for me, is defensive when she says that, you can't refer people to your website. They should be vocal on these cases the same way as they do in some cases. But I understand perhaps they are being sponsored also by these powerful nations. And this is the reason why they are not, vocal enough, or maybe the way they are vocal, their vocality is not so effective enough to really achieve what it's supposed to.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Let me give Annie a chance to respond to that, and then we do absolutely have to wrap up. Annie?
Thank you so much, and thanks to your callers. I would just underline again that Human Rights Watch is sponsored by many people across the world, that we don't take government money, and that we are an international organization. Trinity, I certainly agree with what you're pointing out, that the Security Council at the UN reflects the power dynamics of the world that we live in, and that is a limitation right now, but we all need to work together to encourage that these efforts at bringing justice to victims of the most horrific crimes continue to grow and to continue to become more even, and that leaders who are living in impunity, no matter where they live, no matter where they come from, that they face justice for the human rights violations that they commit.
I'm going to have to leave it there. Annie, thank you so much for giving us your time this morning.
Thank you so much, Seekim. It's been a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. That's Annie Gell, Fellow on International Justice and at Human Rights Watch. And if you're wondering what's going on in the background, that's the gun salute welcoming President Jacob Zuma. He's just arrived here at the celebrations, the official event for Freedom Day, 27th of April. And the National Guard standing at attention. He's just made his way onto the stage, and I'm sure the singing of the national anthem will be taking place pretty soon. We've just had the flyover taking place as well, 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 taking place.